Hi, I'm going to show you a quick video on how to do a compression test and a leak down test on a, this happens to be a Chevy-block, but it's basically all the same. Compression test is easier than a leak down. I've got all my tools hopefully ready. I've got one of my compression testers. The one thing about compression tester, this model that I like is the air valve, which is like a tire valve, is up in the handle. A lot of them have them down in the head. I don't like them down in the head. In fact, I've got another one here and I can show it to you. So this is the part that goes inside the spark plug hole, and then it just has an air Schrader adapter so that I can snap it on and get my compression reading. You might be able to see it better on this one. And so that's a compression tester. Here's another compression tester. I don't even know why I have two, but I do. And as you can see right there in the end of that, I don't know if you can see it, but that's the air valve that holds the pressure in so that the compression tester doesn't lose its reading. I don't like them down in here, and I'm going to show you why in a second. This is a leak down tester. Leak down tester, you basically put air in this side, regulate it to whatever pressure you want to inject into the cylinder, and then you read this side, which is going to connect to, in this case, the same exact short stub that I use for my compression tester. So I'm able to leave this in place from doing compression, and then I can read leak down. And basically all you're doing is you're looking for a delta or a difference between what you're putting in and what is coming out, what the output is holding at. I'm not going to do it one after the other because it's kind of a pain in the neck. To do a leak down, you have to rotate the engine to top dead center on that cylinder on the compression stroke. Compression means both the intake valve and the exhaust valve are closed, so it'll hold compression. And you don't want to use too much pressure on a leak down because you can actually spin the engine backwards. So first things first, I'll just show you the tools real quick. Let me hook my leak down, compression. I've got a ratchet for turning the crank. This will be used for the leak down. It's not used for compression. For compression, what I use is a handheld trigger. This is a trigger switch. This basically bypasses your key switch. This happens to be a boat, and while boats are kind of a pain in the neck because they have huge exhaust manifolds and they've got cooling lines running all over the place, the cool thing about a boat is it has a slave solenoid up in the top, and I can basically just bypass the slave solenoid. So something important to point out about these triggers is, you know, these are little wires. These aren't made to carry 400 amps for your starter. So you don't give power to the starter through this. You give power to the starter solenoid through this. And the reason I'm doing this is I lost an injector on my number 8 cylinder, and I melted a plug. So boat owners are used to stuff breaking down. It seems to break down all the time, but so I'm used to doing compression tests, and I'm used to doing leak down tests just to verify. In fact, I normally do it every season because it's kind of a pain in the neck to pull the deck out of the boat. So what I do is I pull the deck out, and now I can reach everything. So I'm going to pull all the spark plugs, and I'm going to do the compression test. I'm going to do the leak down just to verify that although I lost that fuel injector, that no damage happened to the engine. So as I started to say, the cool thing about a boat is I don't even have to have power on. I don't have the key switch onto the engine right now, and the reason I don't is because you'll probably see in a second when I remove the cover. I've got the fuel system disconnected, so I don't want to be running the fuel pump. If I turn the key on at the helm, that'll turn on the electric fuel pump, and then gas will just be spraying all over the place. So that's first problem. Second problem is you don't want to have primary side going to your distributor coil. So when the key is off, there's no power to the ignition coil. So I don't have to worry about grounding the coil or disconnecting it or doing anything. I can just use the bump starter to give the starter solenoid the voltage just through another means, just without the key switch. So it makes my life a whole lot easier down here. You don't need one of these, but it makes life easier on a boat, I'll say that. Another thing on a boat, because the exhaust manifolds are so big, the spark plugs are deep inside the exhaust manifold. So a lot of times you end up needing a pair of spark plug pliers to get the boots out, because you don't want to be pulling on the wires. And last but not least, should this thing leak, I've got a set of stethoscope with a little tip on the end. It's not an air tip, it's a mechanical, you touch it kind of tip. It's used for hearing like knocks and things like that, but in this case I should be able to hear if there is a substantial leak. I'll be able to tell if it's in the exhaust system or if it's in the intake, or if it's in the oil. A leak into the oil would be bad news. That means it's a lower end problem. That means the cylinder, the rings around the cylinder have actually broken or let loose or aren't closing, they're stuck. So hopefully when I do this leak down, hopefully it doesn't find any problems, but we'll see. So these are my tools. I think I've gone over everything. I'll also be recording I use my iPhone, but you can use pen and a piece of paper. But you want to be writing down all of your compressions per cylinder, and you don't want more than 10%, 15% difference between one cylinder to its adjacent cylinder. Hopefully, these are relatively new engines. They've been professionally built, so hopefully everything checks out okay and it's comparable cylinder to cylinder. If you notice on your own engine, if you end up doing a compression test, let's say, and you've got two cylinders that are adjacent to each other that are both showing low compression, but then all the other ones around show normal high compression, and I'm talking high on the small blocks, probably 125, 140, somewhere in that range, PSI. The big block's even bigger. But if you see two adjacent slugs or cylinders have low compression, then it's normally a head gasket issue between the cylinders. And anything up in the heads, while on a marine engine, is kind of nasty because you have to pull all the hoses and drop all the fluid. It's not as bad as replacing a block. So my testing today, hopefully I find out number 8's okay, and he's actually going to be the last one that I touch. So I'm going to start with number 1 right now and see what happens. So first thing first, I got to take off the cover in my case. The reason is it's right underneath my intake cover is my throttle, which I've got disconnected at the moment because of the fuel rail issue. I had to pull the fuel rail up to get the injector out so that we can check it. And I also wanted to check the heads. I've already pulled the valve cover off and reinstalled it. There's nothing wrong up in the rocker arms, so I put it back in there so that I don't get water or fluid or anything down inside of there. So in my case, I normally have a cover. This is a slave solenoid. Down here is the actual starter and starter solenoid. That's the back of the boat, but it's actually the front of the engine. My engines are backwards in this boat. So I have very, very good access. I have a master disconnect switch right here, which actually delivers power, doesn't deliver power to this engine. So I'm going to turn him on, but the key switch is off. And then what I do is I put the starter switch across my slave solenoid, and if I hit the trigger, it turns over. That's a good sign. Okay, so first thing, get my compression tester. as I said, it's got the air schrader so you can disconnect it. That end is just like a spark plug. Oh, in fact, I've got to pull the spark plugs. So I'm pulling the spark plugs right now, and as you'll see in these pictures, in number 1 through 7, the plugs actually look good. They show the normal amount of darkness. These plugs have about, I don't know, about not many, 35, 40 hours maybe this season on them, and they have about 350 miles on them. Funny thing is, these are 100,000 mile platinum spark plugs, and as you can see by number 8 here, I only got about 350 miles on it. So how did I know I was having a problem? What was happening is I was having an issue where I turned the key and this engine started perfectly when it was cold. No problems, no hiccups, no knocks, no nothing. It just ran perfectly. And the engine ran perfectly until it got warmed up. And once it got warmed up, I'd notice a slight loss of power, but nothing major. Where I noticed it is when the engine was hot, I had trouble restarting it. And did some initial checks. You know, you can see that's a brand new idle air control on there. I've also got new this season throttle position sensors. So I know it's not in that end, so it has to be fuel. And sure enough, when I finally pulled this number 8 plug out, as you can see here, it shows signs of problems. So what this is ignition with very little fuel, which makes it super hot. And on a marine engine, you can't hear any knocks. I wasn't getting any codes. It wasn't anything like that. So, you know, a marine engine is a little bit harder than an automotive engine. So if I can do all this here, you can certainly do it there on an automotive. So let's get underway. So I'm going to try to put this end, which is just like spark plug, into the spark plug hole. I have to do 100% of this by feel because it's impossible to reach and see on a boat. Okay, I've got it in there. It's just finger snug. I'm not trying to really crank it down. Now I'm going to hook up my compression tester. And what you'll hear is a series, as this thing spins around, you'll hear, because all the plugs are out, no effort, and then all of a sudden it'll be poof, poof, because it's having to compress this cylinder that has the compression tester on it. So I normally spin it 4 or 5 times, and you should be able to hear the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Okay, here we go. And I'm reading 125, 130, 134. About 134 psi. I don't know if you can see it on the gauge. So, write that down. That's number 1 cylinder on a Chevy. One other thing that I'm going to do right now is I'm going to spray oil in there. I don't have any heavy oil, which is I wish I had. I wish I had fogging oil with me. Fogging oil on a boat is what you use to winterize it. So I'm just going to use some WD-40. This won't be the last time it's run. I'm not actually winterizing it at the moment. It will be later. So I'm just going to squirt some WD-40 in there because I just want to see if the pressure changes at all once there's fluid. A little bit of fluid in that engine, or in that cylinder. And I'm just going to bump it to spit that out a little bit. There it goes. Because I don't want to start it if it's, or I don't want to compress liquid. That'll break stuff. So all I want is a little bit of oil on the top of that cylinder. Or top of the piston, I'm sorry. And anybody who owns a boat will know the trouble I'm going through right now. And 125, 130, 135, about 137. So it didn't go up much, but I'm going to write it down. Now I'm going to move on to the number 3 cylinder on a Chevy front of the engine, 1, 3, 5, 7, 2, 4, 6, 8. Fords, I had a Ford block. Ford went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's a little bit different. I'll talk about the firing order when it's important, and that'll be when you're trying to do top dead center during the compression stroke. And I'll show you how the top of the distributor actually says the numbers, at least on my engine. Normally the intake cover has the firing order in it. My intake is so buried I can't even see it right now. Oh, you know what? I've got to redo this test. Sorry. One thing I forgot to mention is you got to have the throttle open when you do a compression test. So, good thing I haven't removed that yet. I'm just going to see if I get the same reading. Sorry about that. Okay, I'm going to do exactly the same thing I did before. It's just this time I'm going to hold the throttle open. And where's my starter? And I got exactly the same reading. 135. I think I recorded 136 before. So, no change. But you do want to have that throttle open because you don't want to restrict it. Okay. Any luck, this comes out. I've had trouble with it sticking. And now for number 3. And I have to hit the little button here to reset it. And away we go. I'm just propping this up so that I don't drop it again. Hold the throttle open, spin her 5 times. And she's... hopefully that's not right. I'm going to make sure this is in there. A little bit more snug. Because if that's right, I've got more problems. Oh, and that's my this is my antifreeze overflow bottle. It sits on the deck, so because I have the deck out, I can't. Well, that's not good. It's about 82. Ever have one of those lives? I'm going to squirt oil in, see if it makes any difference. The nice thing about a boat right now is my battery chargers are actually, they're still charging, so I shouldn't run out of battery. Though spinning it this many times on a car, you might. Okay, I'm going to bump it until I see it. There it goes. Did you hear it? So that sounded like it had great compression. I'm not sure why I got such a low reading. Okay, clear my gauge. And that's not much better. 75, 80. It's about 84 psi. That's a problem. Story of my life. So, let me show you on this one. I don't know if you can see it, but it's showing about 87 psi. And then you hit the release. And there she goes. So that's a bummer. Okay, number 5. Okay, clear my tester, hold the throttle open, 110. It's about 113. Give it some oil. Now I'll hit the starter just to spit out oil. I don't want oil on. I don't want this to hydrolock. And you heard it. Hook my gauge back up. Clear it. That is 125, 120, 115, about 114. If you see a big difference between a dry stroke and a wet stroke, then it's probably a ring issue. So I haven't seen that yet, which is good. Okay, pull it out of 5. Go for number 7. Hold the throttle open and hit it. I can feel compression on that one. The gauge is physically twisting in my hand. And that's about 148. Squirt some oil in there. As I was saying about the, it's called fogging oil. You can get it at any marine shop, like a West Marine. The nice thing about fogging oil is it's just like WD-40. It's got the spray nozzle, so you can shove that down inside the hose for the compression tester, so you don't have to unscrew it and do it. So let me bump this, make sure it spits. Oh yeah. That's about 152. Now I'm going to do number 2, and number 2 is what I think the hardest one in this engine. It has a hose that covers the plug, and it's frankly miserable. I don't enjoy this part. Let's see if you can see it on the gauge as I do this. I did it extra because it was still climbing a little bit. And that's 125, 130, 130. Let's call it 133. You can see it there. It's 133. Bump it just until it spits out. Might be able to see it. I don't know. That's 150, 145, 140, 136. And we'll move on to number 4. Okay, this is number 4. Release my gauge. As you can see, that's from last time. Okay, open the throttle. That's about 131. And squirt some oil. Hold this open. And that's 131. About 131. I'll pop it. Getting a cramp standing like this. That's the same exact reading I got before. And we'll move on to number 6. So it goes without saying, and I'll say it again, you don't want to be spitting gasoline, and you don't want to be running your ignition coil without a spark plug attached. You'll blow your ignition coils without a load, and spraying gasoline all over the place is generally a bad idea. So you want to make sure your system's off, turned off. If you have to pull a fuse for the fuel pump, pull it. If you have to pull the electrical connection to the primary side of your coil, do it. But as you can see here, this is my top of my distributor cap, and here's the primary coming in off the coil. For me, it's easy. I'm not sure if you can see if I'm in the way, but right there I can just simply disconnect that from the coil, and then I won't have any ignition. But the worst thing you can do is pull the plug wires off. The distributor always needs, or not distributor, the coil always needs a load on the secondary or the high voltage side. Here we are back at number 6. Throttle open. Okay, 6 is horrible. About 66 psi. Well, looks like I'm looking at new engines again. Let me turn this over so it spits. Open the throttle. 75, 70, 60, 67. And run the compression tester. Throttle open. You can hear there's absolutely no load on this thing. Insert expletive here. So, that's the end. See ya. Okay, so I changed my mind. I'm going to try to bump the engine over to the point when I know both those rockers are closed. So I have to pull the valve cover off. And the rockers that I need to get to are over on this side I'm working on at the moment. And I can lift them out. I can lift the cover enough that I can see them and or feel them. I can't do it on this end very easily, so I want to see if I can hear it coming out the intake, or if this were just a head issue as to why I wasn't getting compression, that would be good. Pull PCV valve. Oh, and by the way, I should mention this. I didn't just willy-nilly remove all the spark plugs. You'll see that I wrote the plug location that they came out of. I also wrote up on the distributor cap end, what position they were in. Exhaust down, coming back up, intake going down, intake fully down, intake up, exhaust up. So right now should be the top of that stroke. I need something soft. Oh, tie wrap. Need to feel the top of the piston, but I don't want anything hard because I'm using the starter to bump it over. It just went too far. I just had it, it went too far. Now I'm going to come back around. Exhaust open, intake open, intake closed. Let's try to leak down there, see what happens. Sure this works with my Schrader. I've got my compressor set for about it's 65 pounds. Pancake compressor's a really handy tool. You know, yeah, it's not as good as my big one back in the shop, but that's kind of the point. So what I'm doing is I'm allowing air to come out so that I can set the regulator. I'm going to set it for 60. Actually, let's set it for 50 for easy math. So I'll set it for 50 under losing air. See how much it goes up when this end's closed off. So that's why I use an air chuck so that I can drop it. So under wide open, there's 50 psi. And this is going to leak like a sieve based on the compression, but hopefully we can hear where it's coming from. In fact, I don't even need the gauge for this. I can hook the hose up. I'm going to turn the battery off. Really, I could just run the air chuck into here and just listen for where it's coming out of, but see if I can do the leak down the right way. And can't hear anything with that running. I'm going to turn it back off. 100% blow by. This might not be as catastrophic as I thought. What I'm doing right now is I'm going to pull the cover off the intake. It feels like metric. Not exactly sure why there's standard and metric all over this engine, but there is. Yep. $10 millimeter. Oh, it's coming out the intake too. That both rocker arms are loose. So what I just did is I just removed the leak down tester. I don't need it anymore. I'm going to run straight air in. So there's about 100 psi. In fact, I'm probably going to bump the engine over again just to make sure that I'm on. It looks and feels to me like both the intake and exhaust valve are closed. Hard to operate a Schrader valve with one hand. Exhaust is definitely open. or not being compressed. So it should be closed, but the intake looks like it might be partially open. Now the exhaust is opening. Exhaust fully open. Intake open. Intake fully open. Right there. It's the same exact position it was in before. Okay, so here's a little bit more air pressure. Here's about 100 psi. I think I've got that off. Should be able to hear that. And I can't tell. I don't think it's coming out the exhaust. I gotta get out of here so I can hear the exhaust. It's not coming out the exhaust. And I can't tell, but I don't think I hear it in the oil. I'm going to check it again here in a second. Okay, so I've got it set for about 100 psi. 100 psi into straight into my adapter because it was 100% leak down, so I'm not even using the leak down anymore. Into number 8. And away we go. So I'm going to hook it up now. And what you'll hear I don't hear it coming out the exhaust. I don't hear it in the oil. I don't hear or smell. I don't think it's down in the lower half. I think it's up in the intake. And both of those rockers should be, or both the valves should be closed right now. Those are the rockers.